Welcome, friends. In this episode, I'm going to introduce myself, talk about my story of grief, and how I'm going to help you moving forward. Welcome, everybody. And this episode, so if you've listened to me in the past, I have talked about my grief journey, my journey through all the things in 2020, 2019, 2020. But if you're new here, I just wanted to reintroduce myself and tell you my story and how I came to be a grief coach and just my journey through that. So, I am Nicole Haugen, and I'm born and raised in North Dakota, and I am a nurse. I have six girls. I'm married to my husband Will for 15 years at the time of this recording. And 2019 was the worst year ever for me. I know a lot of people, 2020 was that, and 2020 was not great for me also, but 2019 was really when my world went upside down and changed multiple times over. And it started with around Easter time. I got a phone call that my dad, who had cancer for the last 10 years, all of a sudden could not walk. He couldn't get out of bed. And me being the nurse, my mom called me and she was like, what do we do? And I'm like, well, does dad want to pursue treatment of this and find answers and try to figure out what's going on? Or is he saying, I know this is the cancer and I want hospice? And so my mom asked him and he's like, no, like I'm ready for hospice. And so I went out there and I got him on hospice services. I was pregnant with my sixth child at the time, heavily pregnant, I might add. I was about 8 months, I think, pregnant. And so it was pretty emotional. I was working as a hospice nurse at the time, and so I was doing a lot of driving back and forth to my parents' farm and to my house. My parents lived about an hour away, and on my days off or in the evening, I would try to go out there and, you know, make sure they had everything they need, try to support them, try to do whatever I could. And in June that year, we had our sixth daughter. We have all girls, and my dad passed away about 6 weeks after that. And so it was a very emotional time for me. I was struggling with being the nurse of the family, trying to educate my brother and sister and my mom on what signs to watch for. Somebody's dying. Is this actually it? And my mom had some experience. She had worked as a CNA in a nursing home when she was younger. And so she kind of knew what to expect. But like when you're losing your spouse, it's a whole different ballgame. And so at times she was short-tempered and like we'd all try to navigate this and figure this out together. And then when my dad died, um, there was there was relief because he was no longer in pain because he was having a lot of pain, especially at the end there. All the medication he was on did not really seem to be cutting or taking much edge of the pain off at all for him. So that was hard to see. Um, my brother was under a lot of stress because he was the one who was trying to move my dad from the bed to the chair. He would lift him like physically. He was exhausted. He was sleeping at my mom and dad's house, trying to take care of things at the farm. And still, he had young kids too. So he was trying to get home to his family as well. My sister lived about, and I should say my brother lived about a mile away from my parents' house. My sister, she lived about 30 minutes away, and same thing. She was juggling a job and trying to be out there. She is not a healthcare person at all. She will do all of the paperwork and all of the number crunching and all the things that need to be done there, but that's not her forte. And that was okay, right? And so we're all trying to find ways that we could help and not be in the way, but be there, talk to my dad, and just navigate that. But then when he passed away, like I said, it was bittersweet because, of course, I missed him. There would be songs on the radio that would play, and I would just start crying. Being a hospice nurse, it was really hard because when I went back to work, there were people that just reminded me of him because of the circumstance or situation they were in. If it especially was like an older gentleman that was had cancer, that was very triggering for me. But it was also rewarding in a way that I was able to help them, right? In ways that maybe I couldn't help my dad. But it did weigh heavily on me that he had pain while he was dying. I felt like a failure. I felt like, as a hospice nurse, especially, that should not happen, especially under my watch. And so I had a hard time sleeping. I would replay those final days and moments and what could I have done differently? Maybe if I would have said something differently, he would have taken the medication better. All these things that I just ran through in my mind on a nightly basis. And so that was hard. Um, and still, of course, like waking up in the middle of the night to nurse a baby and getting up and going to work and managing a household of eight. So all of the things. And then in December that year, um, my brother called because asking if I had seen my mom. And I was like, no, like, we'd just all been together the day before, actually. I was like, no, but if I hear from her, I'll let you know. And he's like, no, like something's wrong. Something's bad. And so I didn't really understand what he meant, but I called my nurse manager at the time and I was like, my brother just called and he said my mom is missing and he's calling the authorities. Like, I don't know what's going on. And she's like, okay, just take the rest of the day off. And I'm so grateful that I had a great manager to help me through all that. But so he called the authorities and they came out and then we were looking for her, and Alzheimer's runs in my family on my mom's side of the family. And so that was my first and foremost concern, was that due to all this stress she had been under, my dad dying, that it had triggered like an early Alzheimer type situation. And she was just very disorientated. And the night before, it had been storming. And so I'm like, did she get mixed up and turn around and couldn't find her way home? And is she out there? And again, I live in North Dakota. So at this point, it was very, very cold, like -40 degree with the wind chill, like very cold. And so went out there, we were driving around looking for my mom. Um, that night the wind kind of shifted and we saw very clearly that there were tire tracks going out into the slough, the water right beside her driveway. And so, we called the authorities back and we're like, we're almost positive that what happened was she missed her driveway and drove onto the water and her car went through. And so they said they'd be back out in the morning with their equipment and divers to do that. And so that is what happened. The way that her road was, and it still kind of is that the water is equal with the driveway. And so when you're out there and there's no trees or any really shelter, and it's just pure white, it's all snow, and the snow is drifting and blowing, you cannot tell if you're driving on snow that's on the road or snow that's on the water. And unfortunately, what happened was she must have thought she was on her driveway because you could see very clearly where she had turned and just went out onto the water and her car sank through. And so the authorities came out. It took them a while to set up their equipment. Took them like about a day and a half to navigate to find the car, and found the car, was able to pull it out of the water. And again, mind you, like it was -60 out. I mean, just extremely cold conditions. So their equipment would freeze up and then they'd warm it up and their divers would get cold, so they have to come out and then they'd re-go again. And found her car, got her car out, and her body was not in the car. And so they resent the divers out and they were looking in this area and they were just about to call it quits when they actually found her. They found her body and again, by that time she had gone missing Sunday, which we didn't know till Monday morning. I believe they found her car on Tuesday, and it wasn't until Thursday they found her body. So mind you, this had been going on for multiple days. And there was relief that they had found her body. Part of we were concerned we'd have to wait till spring, till things melted and it was warm. Um, but then the reality started to hit that, oh my gosh, like my mom died this way. This is horrible. Like I don't know what happened. Like, I mean, I do know, right? We know that she thought she was going on her driveway, but we don't know. And we know that she tried to get out of the car because her body wasn't in the car. But like I would replay those moments for her in my mind over and over and over again and basically torture myself with that. And and then we had the prayer service and the funeral, and a week after that was Christmas, and that was just miserable, you guys, just miserable. I mean, I had six children, my brother had three children at the time, and we were all trying to be happy, but we were all sad. And it was horrible, horrible. It was horrible. And and so we're okay, we're picking up the pieces, we're going through the new year, we're trying to figure out life without her, without my dad. And a month after my mom died, I found out. So I was at home one day. I had the day off work and there was a knock on the door. Go to answer the door. Here it's the mailman. I have to sign for a letter. Open up the letter, and it's revealed to me that my husband has thousands of dollars in credit card debt that I had no clue about. And this debt was being handed over to collections. And so I signed for this letter and I was shattered. I was absolutely shattered. The betrayal that I felt from somebody who I thought I've been together with him since high school. I've been dating him since the 11th grade. This man knows me inside and out and knows what I'm going through right now. And on top of that, he's been lying to me. He's been stealing money from us. He's been using this. Like I have never felt such a crushing pain in my life. It was worse, I think, than the death of my parents because I knew I was going to have to deal with this in some shape or form in many years to come. Like, how do you even move past this? And so that is what my journey is about. I We are still together. We were able to come through that. It has been years, you guys, of healing through that. There's moments where either one of us or both of us have wanted to call it quits, but we haven't. And so that is the grief that I have gone through and healed from. And I still obviously have moments where I am sad, but it's not the crushing, overwhelming feeling. I'm coming out of it, and it has taken years, years for all of this. And and I also struggled with, I felt like I couldn't grieve my parents because I was trying to fix my marriage. I was trying to hold that together. And so I felt like I put my grieving of my parents on hold for somebody who betrayed me so in such a way that I couldn't imagine that that also added on to the grief, right? I had like grief on top of grief on top of grief on top of grief. And so all of again, while still raising my children, my oldest at the time was 9, had just turned 9, um, right before my mom died. And so 9 down to an infant. And so still working. And then the wonderful pandemic hit. And so we were together all the time and trying to navigate life that way. And then I found life coaching. And so really what life coaching has done for me has allowed me to work through my feelings, allowed to process that grief and realize like all the ways that I had been showing up in my life, harming not only those around me, right? Like by like yelling at my kids or like holding on to resentment and anger towards my husband, but also towards myself. Like I am an overeater, I'm an emotional eater. And so the things I would do is I would just like check out and I would just eat and eat and eat. Or I would check out and I would just like be on my phone for hours. Or I would either oversleep or not sleep hardly at all. And so the ways that it was hurting me also is what want to help you guys with. I want to help you through your grief and then to like eventually start to find joy in little things again. And I know that for most of you, when you're listening to this, like it feels like it's never going to happen. Like the grief is so crushing that you can't imagine a day that it won't just push you to the ground and you are doing everything you can just to breathe and get through. And I want to just offer you hope that it is possible. And that's what I want to lead you through on this podcast is the hope of getting there. And I will hope in you and I'll hold that belief for you until you can have it yourself. And so that is my journey with grief. And the journey doesn't end, right? Because it's not like at one day I just get there and I'm like, oh, great. I'm an orphan. My parents are dead. Yeah, my husband betrayed me all those years ago, but like, no, I'm great now. Like, I will always have these holes in my heart for my parents. I'll always have a little hole in my heart for the way that I thought my marriage was, and I found out it wasn't. But through that, through all that, there is hope. There is hope of something better to come, and maybe not even better, but different. And learning to be that it's okay, that life looks different now, because it is different, because those people are no longer here. And so a part of it too is I want to help you if you are in the stages of anticipatory grief. Maybe you're a caregiver and you care for your loved one, or your loved one is on hospice, or maybe even like home health, palliative care, and you're like, this is hard, because it is. It is hard. Grief is hard. All of that is hard. But I want to walk you through that and give you just practical tips on how to survive and handle those hard days. So tune in and I will keep you up to date and we will work through this together. And I am so excited for all of the great episodes to come. So I, I hope you guys have the best day that you can have, and I'm praying for you.